Okay, welcome to WebDev 02, and this is batch C of 2024. In this course, we are going to be developing the back end of an infectious disease reporting system. We are going to learn all of the concepts of databases. We are going to be using MySQL, a variation of MySQL, MariaDB, and we are going to be looking at Python from basics to professional level. And towards the end of the course, we are going to have our class project where we are going to tie all our knowledge together into a software development project. My name is Mildred, and I had my first degree in computer science in Nigeria, Kogi State University in Nigeria. And then I had my database certification with Oracle, both OCE and OCP. And then I had my web development and web engineer certifications from Microsoft. I moved on to the US and had my master's degree in software engineering from Harvard University and my graduate degree in data science from Harvard University. I am currently a full stack developer, a database administrator, a DevOps engineer, and a cloud engineer. And I am the consultant for infectious disease elimination for all of Eastern Caribbean countries. I have both authored, developed, and implemented national level softwares for over 6 countries in the healthcare sector and in the education sector. My major domain for software development is usually healthcare, public health, and education, specifically special education. So I bring a wealth of knowledge, and I'm going to try to share this knowledge with you. Most of what you will learn here, you might never have seen it before. I was self-taught, and I tried to put all of my struggles when I was trying to learn how to develop software into a curriculum. And I got to understand what we need to tie together into a software development project. I realized that schools will not teach you these things. In fact, a lot of the lecturers and a lot of the staff and professors have never even built a software to their name or architected a software before. And then you begin to wonder, how do you teach what you don't know how to do? Or how do you give a technical experience to people, teach them a technical way in something you've not done before? Because no matter how we learn theoretically, if you don't have practical knowledge and you don't have years of experience, you can't actually effectively pass on knowledge to anybody. And so that's why we have a world filled with self-acclaimed IT gurus who have all sorts of misconceptions. And then when it comes to getting the work done, you hardly ever find one in every part of the world, even in first world countries, that can actually get the job done. And so here at School of Programming, we are going to learn what happens in the real world, and we are going to learn how to get the job done. We are going to be doing live projects, and we always have open paid internship positions. There are people here who have been interns before, who have moved to full employment from being interns, that are actually present on this course because they took courses that qualified them for internship. And all our internships for now are paid internship, and we try to place students on real-world projects where they get hands-on experience. So if you do well, you try to make sure your grade for every assignment, practical, is delivered on time. You do not score less than 80 in each of the assignments. You've reached a specific milestone, week 10 to week 18 of the lessons. You'll be eligible to apply for open internship if the internship is open for your region. Okay? So this course is a 30-week course. We are going to divide these 30 weeks into different parts. And the first part is going to discuss MySQL, where we are going to look at databases from beginners to intermediate level. We move to part 2, where we look at beginners Python. And in part 3, we are going to go into more complex topics and tie this up into a project. We are going to look for real-world projects, use real-world forms, and try to solve a problem that actually exists in the real world through development of software. Okay? So we'll start by looking at the site so you can know how to navigate the site before we get into the topic of the day. So when you registered for the course, you would have gotten an activation email that gives you both the link to activate your account and the link to join the class WhatsApp group. It's important to join the WhatsApp group because when you have difficulties, that is the fastest way you can book a one-on-one session with your instructor. Every student is entitled to a 30-minute one-on-one session. So when you're studying, after the lesson, there is a topic that is so difficult, you have to contact any of the admins on WhatsApp, particularly Edmond, and get a time slot for your one-on-one session. One-on-ones are usually via Zoom, and he will be able to give you a time based on your time zone for your session. Try not to come for one-on-ones without having your questions ready. It's not going to be a session where they'll teach you what you have not read. You have to come with a question and a difficulty. You have to come earlier, not when your assignment is due the following hour. So if it's about the assignment and you need clarity, or it's very difficult for you and you need a walkthrough, you have to book early. So it's always good to start early, watch your videos early, try it early, get a slot early so you can meet up. Okay? So we have the site school.midwaygroup.com. When you log into the site, it will take you to the student homepage. Now you can read through the information on this page. It is not specific to any course. It is a general information for all students, regardless of the course that you are already studying. So you want to take note of the left side bar and also this home icon to see the links that are present. The most important and the first link is to locate this registered courses classroom and then select classrooms. Now, the courses you are registered for will all be displayed by their course code. This is WebDev 0224C, and when you click on it, you are now in the classroom where you see all of the announcements that have been posted. Most of the time, or all of the time, once announcements are posted, you get an email about the announcement, and if you come to the page, you find the same announcement there. Announcements are always set to expire on specific date, at most 1 week. So if there are any important information you want to save from the announcement, you want to do so as soon as you see it before the next week announcement comes on. Then there are other classroom information about your instructor and about the course breakdown, how the amount of course activities and how they are graded, and all of the different parts and what the course is all about. And then when you scroll down, you have a table that shows all of the things that have been uploaded, the start date and the end date. Now this is week 2. Last Friday was week 1. Our lessons we hold every Friday exactly at this time. We used US Eastern Time as our time zone, so we'll let you know when daylight saving changes, so you can adjust your clock or your time zone converter accordingly. So you see the start date of that week's activities and the end date. So when we have assignments, you see the assignment code, and then you see the day that assignment is due. It is always due by 11:59 p.m. US Eastern Time, and for those of you in the Caribbean, it's going to be the same time for Atlantic Standard Time, while daylight saving is on, and it's going to be 1 hour ahead while daylight saving ends. For those of you in Ghana, it is going to be +4 hours, Nigeria +5, Liberia +4, Zambia and Zimbabwe +6, and then those in East Africa +7 hours. So you add 7 hours to the Eastern Time for East African countries. You are going to find the lessons here. These lessons expire every week. So once it's week 3, you won't find week 2, you will only see week 3. Beneath it, you'll find the lessons all on YouTube and their links. So if the lesson expires, you want to go back to previous lesson, you find them all on YouTube here, and they'll always remain here throughout the course duration for you to be able to go back to previous lessons. On the right side of these lessons, we have the assignments. Now, take note of instructions. As a software developer, you must be able to read instructions and understand. We grade instructions in this course. If you can't follow instructions, you can't be an intern, you can't get opportunities, and you will not pass technical interviews. So instructions are reading something like submission instructions and following it exactly how it is. We have assignment file here, where if you click on, you can see the questions, the grading rubric, and then you begin to attempt the questions. All assignments have a 2 weeks duration. They are practical assignments and they reflect what we have taught in the class for us to test your knowledge. And at some point, we give you exactly the same questions you find in technical interviews for those of you who want to move on to writing tests for talent networks and trying to get remote IT jobs. So this is the course navigation. On the home icon here, we'll find coursework submission and then expired classes. If you want to download videos, we can come to expired classes here, select your course code, the course you are registered for, and then you see the different lessons that have been uploaded here. You play video, and once you are on the video, you can select this icon here and click on download to download the videos. So for those of you who have network issues or use data that is costed or that is metered, you might want to just download your video so you have a downloaded copy that you can watch over and over again. It's advisable to download because at the end of the course, week 30, once your certificate is issued, you will lose access to a lot of the resources that you had in the class. So you might want to save them, download them, or whatever you will need for future reference. Now, the passing grade is 70%. Once you don't score 70%, you will not earn a certificate. We try to let you know your grades as early as 2 weeks in advance if you're not going to make it to the end, and that is why we have the first assignment must be submitted. Whoever does not submit the first assignment by the due date is going to be unregistered. We try to make sure that everybody enrolls without financial commitments because IT is very misunderstood. People usually think this is what they want or this is what they want to do. And when they get in, it's either they feel that this is not supposed to be the course they want to do front end and not back end, or maybe they don't like the style of teaching, or maybe they don't think IT is for them, maybe it's too difficult, maybe they don't have the time commitment that they thought they had, anything like that, anything. And because of that, we want everybody to explore, at least for 5 weeks. So when you make a decision after 5 weeks, it will be an informed decision. You know, this is what I want to do. I have the time commitment. I like it. Then I will pay to continue to the end. But by the 5 weeks, if you just are not satisfied or you are convinced that this is not what you want to do, then you don't need to do anything. The system will register you by the time the payment deadline ends. So by week 3, we filter students. We unenroll people that we think cannot cope based on their assignment submission and the grades for the first assignment. Those that doesn't submit first assignment will all be unenrolled, and those that remain in the course will be sent invoice to make payments. Now you can go to the fees page here and you can see the payment breakdown, the cost, and for those who want to pay instrumentally. If you do not like the installment structure or it doesn't work for you, you can send an email to or a message to any of the admins, and we'll send you an email address where you can send your suggested fee structure that works for you. And if you get approval, then you can go ahead to pay in that structure. But we have due dates. First installment must be paid after week 5, second installment week 10, third installment week 15. If you want to pay in more than 3 installments, you have to seek approval. Okay. So this is the introduction of the school and the site. Anybody has questions before we move on to the topics that we are supposed to discuss? Okay, so I'll take it there are no questions. So in this course, we have 13 practical assignments. We'll have 3 MCQ quizzes, which each of the quiz consists of 50 questions that we'll do at the end of each part. We'll have a final examination and then an independent project. So sometime at the end of part 2, you'll be required to submit a project topic and the software you are going to develop by yourself, but with guidance. But we were going to develop one in class during our lessons. Okay. For our class project, we've said before, we are going to be building the back end of an infectious disease reporting system. And for that system, we're going to need all of the knowledge from MySQL and from Python. So your course resource that was uploaded last week contains instruction on how to install MySQL Workbench. It is free to install. You just need to download it from the internet, follow the instruction for your operating system, and get that installed. I'm not going to demonstrate the live lessons with MySQL Workbench for those whose operating system cannot, or it's outdated and they cannot install MySQL Workbench. You can install XAMPP server and by going to apachefriends.org and download the XAMPP server for your operating system. When you install it, you come to dev.mysql.com to download the sample databases. Secular database is what we use in the pre-recorded videos. So in the live class, I would try to use another database so we can have a wide range of examples to be able to understand the topics deeper. So you can download any of the databases there. Our assignments might be majorly in secular database, since that's what we have in pre-recorded videos and everybody is required to have that database. If you use MySQL Workbench, sometimes it comes by default with the installation. If you don't have it, you just come to this page and you download it. If you have any problems with installation and setup, please contact any of the admin and we'll book a one-on-one sessions where we will help you get your system set up. So MySQL is a relational database management system. We have other relational database management systems, but we will use MySQL since it's one of the most popular. And we're going to use a variation called MariaDB, which is just like MySQL. It's similar actually. For our use case, we are not going to see the difference between MariaDB and MySQL. We are going to look at how to write SQL query. Now, SQL is the structured query language. MySQL is the management system for the structured query language that we're going to use. So when we talk about relational, what we mean is that things are related. When you go to a school, you want to have a file that has all of the teachers' information. Now that file is called, maybe you call the file the teachers folder. Because it has information about teachers alone, that is a relational database of all of the teachers. Everything they are related. They are all teachers. You have another file that are all students. Relational database is just like having the same file system, but having it on the in E format. So data is stored in tables. Each table is just like you having a folder that has related information. Those tables have this related information in rows. So each new row represents a new record. The columns just tell you what item is defined. So you can have a first name column that holds all the first names for all the people, the last name column that holds all the last names. So you hear about a database, a table, then the rows and column within the table. So that's all about relational database. MySQL is that management system that you can use to write your queries. When we talk about queries, we're talking about the statements we write that we use to retrieve data in different formats. We retrieve data based on conditions. We retrieve data by filtering the data and just taking some parts of the data, or we receive data by combining different records from different tables. In MySQL, we write something we call comments. And you will use comments a lot, because at the time of writing your codes or developing any system, you might have an idea, you might have this light bulb moment, and then the next minute it's off your head. You can't even remember why you were thinking that way. You use comments to leave a note to your future self. Or you are working in teams and you want a code review. You use comments to leave a note for other developers to follow and understand your thought process, what you were thinking when you wrote that. Leave links to external resources where you saw documentations about this and why you did this the way you were doing it, or what is next left to be done. So it's just generally to leave notes. Again, when you are testing your code, sometimes you want to test line by line and you don't want to delete it and start typing all over again. You'll use comments to just comment out the part you don't want the system to execute. In MySQL, you can use a £sign to just write a note. Let's say we want to write, this is lesson 1. We don't want this statement to be processed. We're just leaving a note to say whatever is coming under, this is the topic or this is the reason. We use a £sign for a single line comment, which means that when you start the next line, it is no longer going to continue as a comment. It's going to be seen as an SQL query. You can use $! sign like this to do the same thing, and this is the comments too. When you start a new line, that ends. But let's say you want to write a whole note, author information, description, write definitions, and all that. Those are multi-line comments. You don't want to be putting a hash or this on several lines. You can put a /, an asterisk, and then you can start writing. And when you start a new line, you continue until it meets an asterisk and a /, then to know that this is the end of the comment. So remember that you use comments to leave notes. You use it to write definitions or write stuff. Anything you do not want to be processed. If we go to other programming languages, any code you don't want the interpreter to run, but to see as this is a note, is not part of the code. Okay? So there are other ways to write comments. These are the major ways you are going to see. You're going to see other ways that is more advanced, but these are the 3 methods you will readily use to write comments. Anybody with question? Okay, so we have sent pre-recorded videos, and every Friday morning or before, well, morning for me, but before the end of the day for you, or most of you, especially those in Africa, you are going to get a new announcement. Welcome to week 1, week 2, whatever week it is. And this is week 2. So this is the start of week 2. And this is our first live class, which means that we are going to combine topics from week 1 and week 2. The first thing we are going to look at is how to query data. So when we talk about query, what do we mean? When we say we are querying data, it just means that we are asking the data for a result. Let's say we have a table we call employees. We want to ask to give me all the employees that are males, but I want to know the number of employees that are on the record. Those are called queries. There are different structures for writing queries based on the relational database management system that you use. SQL queries are generally basically the same, but now based on the relational database management system, you begin to find different variations. In MySQL, we have a statement we call select. This select statement is very powerful. This is what you will use to get something, just like you're saying select, as the word means, select. If you see an asterisk in MySQL, it means 2 things. Asterisk means all, asterisk means multiplication. So depending on the context of what you are writing, the interpreter will know what the asterisk means. But when we use select and we use an asterisk, it means all. When we put a number and we put an asterisk and another number, we know it means multiply. So when we put an asterisk, we mean select all. I want to use this database called Classic Models to demonstrate this. Now, most of you have MySQL Workbench based on the instructions sent last week, and I'm using this alternative just because the pre-recorded videos has MySQL Workbench, and for those who are going to use this, to have examples that demonstrate both usage, and we'll be able to use both. So I'm using classic models. I don't want to use secular since you have secular examples already. And this classic model has several tables. We have the customer tables. So let's say we want to look at all of the information in the customer tables. The first thing you want to do is to select the database you are using, and you use and the name of the database, which is classic models. So every time you come to start working, you want to select the database you are using, and you use the use statement and then the name of the database. People that are using my PA3 MyAdmin can just click on this, and then it just knows that it is using classic models database, and I clicked on the customers table. Or you can just click on the classic models database. It gives you the database and the name of the table. When we are in the database, we can write a command, show tables, to give us the list of all the tables that are in the database. If we want to say, let's look at what the customer table holds, let's look at the different columns and the kind of data it holds. We'll come here and we'll say, select, we use the asterisk sign, from. So the SQL keyword we are using here is select. The asterisk means all the columns. We are referring to this. So this part keeps column names, and we don't want to specify each of the column names. We want to even see what the column names are. We don't know in advance. So we say select all from the name of the table, which is customers. Now, while it's not case sensitive, it's just a good and neat convention to put all SQL keywords in uppercase letter, and then the names of table and columns in lowercase letter, like this. So I'll say select all from customers, and when I click on go here, I will now see the different rows and columns. So each line of information here represents a row, and each here with the headings here are the columns. In this customers table, we have the customer number, we have the customer name, and we can see all of the column information that we have here. We selected all. Let's say we don't want to take everything here. These are not important information. Let's say we just want to know the name of the customer, the customer number, the city the customer lives in, and the country. This time, your query is not going to be select all. You just list the column names. Select, and each of the column name you will list as a comma separated list. And so we had customer number, we had customer name, I think. Yeah, we had customer name, and then we also had the city, and we had the country. So we've listed the columns that we want as a comma separated list like this, and you say select the names of the columns you want from customers. And when you do this, you don't need to put the backtick like this. You can just leave it like that. So you select customer number, customer name, city, country from customers. So this will reduce the number of columns and give us just what we want to see. And in your software development, you don't want to load the whole database table to return a query just for you to select one. So you only take what you want to increase performance or to optimize performance. Any question? So the syntax for a basic SQL query is select column names, or use asterisk to indicate all, from table name, and you get everything. If you want to select based on a condition, let's look at another table. We have the others table. Let's say select all from others. Let's see what columns others hold. So I'll say select all from others. So others table holds the order number, order date, required date, ship date, status, and comment, and customer number. We want to say, for instance, we want to select, let's say, the order number, the order date, and the ship date from this table. But we can see that some rows have a ship date and some might not have a ship date. Like these ones that are null means that it has not been shipped, it was cancelled, it is on hold or is in process. We don't just want to load this information and query to say, give me all the orders. We want just the column order number, order date, and ship date. We want to say we don't need this information except the status of the ship is shipped. So we want to get information of all of the orders that have been shipped. And we don't want to get the whole columns. We just want the order number, order date, and the date it was shipped for only orders that are shipped. So this is the point where we begin to get conditional statements, where we want to filter or select based on a condition. And it is going to be select column names, and the column that we say we wanted were order number, we wanted order date, we also wanted ship date, and we want all of these from the orders table, and we want to put a condition. We use where clause, where has what we use to indicate the condition. We want to select all of this from the orders table where the status column, so where the information in the status column is equal to shipped. So any row that marks the status as shipped, we want that row of information. That's what we mean. So we'll do select the column names that we want. If we want all the columns, we just use an asterisk instead of listing them out. From table name, where condition. And the condition is where column name is equal to value. If the value is a number, you don't put it within quotes. If it's a text like this, you put it within quotes. That value must exactly match the same way it was typed and saved in the database. When I click on go, I'm going to get only orders that are shipped here. You get the order number, order date, and ship date. So I'll give you a real world example. Like if you have let's see what is common all over the world. Let's say you have a Netflix account and you want to have child control. You have children, you don't want them to watch any movie that is rated 18. And you create a new profile that is kids there. This is the kind of query that runs under the hood, where it only displays movies that are classified as children movies, maybe PG and parental guidance, and maybe PG-13 and all those other ratings that minors can watch. So it would be like select all the movies from the movie database where rating is equal to PG. And that is what brings out, displays only those movies for you to see on the front end. Because on the back end, this is the query that was run. And when we get to part 3, we begin to run this query for you to see how it displays on forms. We want to see how many people registered for a particular course. Select all from students where course registration contains a particular course code. It gives you just that list. So by the time you see and you just click and things are just happening when you click, these are the codes that run under the hood. You want these codes to run fast. You don't want your system to be rolling slowly. That's why you just select what you need, the specific columns you need, and don't load the whole database. You can even select and limit the number you return. You can return just 5 columns or 5 rows. And so we'll look at that when we look at next week's lesson, and we'll look at more aggregate functions and how to limit the number of rows that we return. Anybody with question?
None from me.
Okay. So when we write queries like this, we can even say, for instance, let's look at the customers table. We select all from customers. We have this customer number, we have the name. And you can see these names are not sorted. This starts with A, this starts with S, this A, this L, this B. Let's say we want to sort these names in either ascending or descending order. In MySQL, we can use a condition. So we say we want to select all from customers where clause. Where clause is what we use when we want to put a condition to the query. We have another clause that we will use when we want to put a condition, but it's only when we put a condition to a grouped clause, and we're going to look at it next week. But for now, let's just watch the where clause. So we say select all from customer. We can use a where clause to put a condition, but this time we want to order this in ascending or descending order. So we use the clause order by. When you say order by, you specify the column that you want to rearrange the results by. Do you want it to sort by customer number or to sort by customer name? We want it by customer name. By default, ascend in ASC is the order. If you don't specify the order you want it sorted, it will automatically sort in ascending order. So if you want to specify it, it's ASC, but there's no point since it's the default. And when you click on Go, you'll find that the customer name is, well, is it customer name? We use the number. We use number. Sorry, let me use name. So I'll say select all from customer, group by customer name. And then when I say go, we'll see that the name is sorted in alphabetical order here. You can sort by more than one column. You can say group by customer name, comma, customer address or something. So it's going to sort by the name first and then by the second column that you list, like that. So we can say group by customer name, and then you can put comma and say customer. Let's use customer number as the second order, and you'll see how this is going to present. It will sort by the name and then sort also by the number within the name. So when you put two sort order like that, you put them according to how you need to sort, and then we'll look at this more complex queries as we go deeper. But for now, just know that you use the group by clause to sort. You use the group by clause to group data. We talk about sorting. We use order by to sort. Now, when we say we are grouping by customer name, now you see the error that I just made now. We are saying group by customer name here on this query. It is not grouping it because there's no how we can group this by customer name. When you are grouping, you have to have a query where let's say you are using an aggregate function. You want to get a total number of orders a particular customer have done. So when you use group by, it will now group all of the orders by customer number or by the column that you have used. Now we use it here. We did not catch that this is not the sort query that we need to use. We need to use order by. And then we use customer name, and then we can order customer number as the second order and go. And then you will see that the first sort order is by customer name, second sort order is by customer number. It was the 1 and 2 here. I don't know if my SQL workbench will do this, but you get the point. Now, if you want this to be in descending order, you will do the same query, but this time you specify the order you want it to be sorted by, and descending is written DESC like this, and then when you say go, it will sort this in descending order. So we want it to be customer name, customer number. It's not the same, it's not in descending the result. Let's do the query again. We want it to sort by customer name, and we want it to be in descending order. And then we say go, and then we have this from W, V, U in descending order. So you use select column names or asterisk for all from table name, and then you use order by. The order by clause is for sorting. Order by column name, and then you specify if you want descending order, DESC. Now, I just use group by to illustrate an error, and I will show you what we use group by to do shortly. Before we do aggregate functions and use group by, let's look at the different aggregate functions that we have in MySQL. Now, when we talk about aggregate function, is when we want to return a particular grouped value. Like I want to return the average of numbers. There's a function we have called average, AVG, like this. And we want to return the sum of numbers. We have a function sum. Or want to return the total number of something. We have count. So there are several aggregate functions. I want you to reset them, and once you do reset them, you want to try them out. So let's try a few so that you will know how to use them when you see different aggregate functions. We are going to be using them as we go along, but for now we can't cover each aggregate function. We'll just do some examples for you to just know how to use them. So let's say we want to count the number of orders that have shipped. We'll say select Now we use the aggregate function count. In the parentheses of this count function, we'll specify the column name. Now, if we want to see, let's look at the orders table. We want to see the number of orders that have shipped. We have the order number. And order numbers, we know that is most likely a unique number, because you don't want to have two order numbers that are the same, then you will not know which order is that. So order numbers are unique. And we want to say, okay, let's count this unique column. Since the items here are unique, we are going to count this column to give us the total number that we want. Then we want to use a condition to say the status must be shipped for it to be part of the count. So we want to use order number column, we want to use the status column. So I will say select, and the aggregate function count. In the parentheses, I'm going to specify the name of the column, which is order number. So select count order number, and I will say I'm selecting this from the orders table, and I'll use the where clause to put a condition. We say we want it where the status is equal to shipped. And then when I say go, I will get the total number 303 orders where have been shipped. But if you look at the column name here, it's not a beautiful name. Count order number is the column name. We want it to have a nice name. And this is where we use alias. In MySQL, we use the has, AS, to give it a new name. So we have select count order number, and then if we want to return the column with a nice name, we'll put has, and then a name we want it to. Let's say has total orders from orders where status is equal to shipped. And then when I click on go, it's now bring total order. It's supposed to be an S here, there's a typo, but you get the points. The column name is now changed, and now alias, you use has. Every time you are using an aggregate function, or you are returning different columns, even if it's not aggregate function, you just want to rename a column so you can have a better name, you use has clause, AS, and then you specify the new name that you want for that. That name should not have spaces. If it's going to have space, maybe you quote the name, but I use underscore sometimes to avoid spaces, because in programming sometimes spaces are a problem if you have like variable name. We're going to see that as we go deeper, how spaces are a problem. Okay, so you put an underscore, you don't want to space between a word or a letter, except if it is quoted. If it's a string, you quote it, and then the system knows that all of this is one sentence. Okay, or one number. Anybody with question? Okay, let's say we have a payments table here. So let's say we want to see this table. We have a customer number 103, 103, 103. So there are 3 103s. So it just means that for the person has made several orders, and these are the amount paid for each of the order. But let's say we want to select the total amount of money that this person spent. So instead of returning just each of these and then we use the calculator to calculate, we can do something like this. So once we get the total amount, we can say select, and then we use an aggregate function we call sum. In the parentheses, we are going to specify the column whose sum we want. So let's say select sum amount. Let's give this a name as total spent. Okay. We want to also get the column customer number also. From, we want it from the payments table. And because we are aggregating sum of what a particular customer spends, and there are several rows that have the same customer number, the same customer made orders several times, and we want to be able to aggregate this and get the sum, which means we need to group all of the customers by their number, so that when we have group 1 is customer number 103, we group it so that it can sum that group. Group 2 is customer number 114, we group it. So we use the clause group by. And we're going to specify the column we are grouping by. So we're grouping by that duplicate column, which is customer number. So the syntax is select column names. Now we're aggregating the amount column. So we put that amount in the parentheses of an aggregate function we call sum. We want to give it a nice name so that the column will not be named sum amount. We want the column to be named total spent when it returns the result. We also want to have the customer number column also. We are selecting all of this from the payments table, and we are grouping the data by the customer number so that the amount will be calculated by customer number. So it will say customer 103. Let me group them, and I'll give you the total amount for that customer. That's what the group by here means. And then when I go, I will have this customer 103. We now see that we only have the customer number specified once. It's not repeated anymore. It gives us a total amount. It just calculates the total from all of the different rows that customer has information, and just calculated the total or added the total of the amount column for that particular group, which is the customer 103, give you the total amount spent. Did that for every single customer. And so by the time you say you are building, let's say, an education portal or education system, and you want the system to automatically give you the top students, the bottom students, you can use the max and min aggregate function, but you just want it to display results according to their performance, ascending or descending order. You can run this kind of code behind the hood where it calculates all the grades of a particular student's ID, matriculation number, and totals it there and tell you what the grades are automatically in ascending or descending order by using all of these queries. And so when we get to part 3 is where you see how we add all of this together in a software development project. So I want you to research other aggregate functions and see how they use them, and but basically used in the same way. You just need to know when to use them, especially in what use case it is better. Sometimes we write a query, we use different clauses, and we can actually write the same query in a different way. We can do the same query using subqueries or using joins or using this. You want to write elegant code, complex is not better than simple. When you have 2 solutions, always pick the simpler one, the one with the shorter code. And always, sometimes you want to run a time it function, especially like in Python, to see which one executes faster. So while you are building and looking at optimization at the same time. Any question? Okay, so we have different operators. We call operators. When we say operators, we mean things we use to perform operations like arithmetic operator. We have plus, minus, division, multiplication. We have something we call modulo. In MySQL, we use the plus sign for addition, minus sign for subtraction, asterisk sign for multiplication, / for division, and percentage sign for modulo. Now, we know what the other ones are. Let's look at what the modulo is. If we have something that, let's say they say write a function that will display all of the odd and even numbers. You want to group all of the odd and even numbers. You want to write a condition. How will you know that the number is odd or the number is even? When it is even, when you divide it by 2, you don't have any remainder. When it is odd, you have a remainder. When you divide by 2, you always have a remainder of 1. This is where the modulo operator comes in. When I say select 5% 2, which means 5 modulo 2, which means that give me the result. Give me the remainder of 5 divided by 2. I don't want you to give me the answer. I want to know what is the remainder if I divide 5 by 2. When we do this and we run, we're going to get 1. So it will tell you 5 modulo 2 is 1. So when you divide 5 by 2, the remainder you will get to be 2 remainder 1. When you want to get the remainder of a division, you use the percent sign modulo like this. And when you begin to write conditional statements and functions, then you can now say, I want to get all of the even number. I want to test this data. And most of the time, we are doing things dynamically. When you are selecting from the database, you don't know in advance what data it is, how the data looks like. Your query has to be dynamic. So when I say select all the numbers from a particular table, and I want to say, when you select all of these numbers from this table, I want to just give me only the even numbers. So you said you pass all those numbers modulo 2. If the remainder is 1, put it in the even side. If the remainder is 0, the remainder is 1, put it in the odd side. If the remainder is 0, in the even side. We are going to see live examples of this in software development. So these are the arithmetic operators that we have in MySQL. We also have something we call comparison operator, and we've used one just now when we say in all our queries. Let's say, for instance, when we say where amount, and we put equal to a particular amount. Equal to is a comparison operator. What we want to say is greater than. Greater than is an operator. Less than is an operator. These are all comparison operators. You're comparing two things. You can say greater than or equal to, written like this. If the thing is greater than or equal to, or you say less than or equal to, or you want to have not equal to, you put less than and greater than like this to specify not equal. Okay? So we also have, or let's look at an example of how we use the comparison operator so that you just get an idea. Let's say we want to select the total. Let's look for an example that will help in your assignment. Okay, yeah, this will help in assignment also. Let's say we want to select the total amount of money spent by a particular customer, and this will do it from the payments table from a particular customer. And when we want to get the sum, we're going to group by the customer number, but we want the result that will be returned to be a result of customers that spent over 200,000 or something. But when we see the amount here, we have 6.78. By the time he adds these three together, it might be 200,000 or so. Okay, let's say 300,000, so that we'll see that some of these customers' information will not display. So let's write it like this first. We will see what will display without a condition, and then we'll see what will be displayed with the condition. So we'll say select, and we're doing aggregate, sum, and say sum amount, has total spent. So always remember your aliasing if you want to have beautiful column name. In software development, you always have to alias so that you can know the name of the column and not let it give you this ugly looking column name. Customer number, and we're doing this from the payments table. and we are grouping by, because when we are aggregating, we have to group what we want to sum, right? So we say group by customer number. Let's just group first before we see what to return. Now we've gotten the total amount spent by each customer, because we aggregated, we got the sum, and we saved it in a column name called total spent, and then we got the customer number. So you just see this customer spend this amount, that customer spend that amount. But we want to say, I don't want to see all of these figures that are less than 200,000. I just want people that have spent 200,000 and above. Let's say you have these e-commerce sites that you want to give premium members or platinum members based on the amounts that they spend. So the kind of query you run is the same thing, but when you group and you want to filter a group, a result of a group, you don't use a where clause now. You use something we call a having clause. So we'll say having total spend, because now this is where it is important to alias all of these aggregate columns so that you can refer to it. So we'll say having total spend greater than 200,000. And then when I go, we will only see these two greater than 200,000. So we have removed all of the, so if we want to say we want gold members, these are the ones that are qualified for it. And so these are the queries that run behind the hood. Anybody with question? So we have other operators like the logical operators, where we have things like and, or, exist, between, in, like. We are going to actually use most of these logical operators as we go on. But for now, let's just look at and an or operator, an in operator. Let's look for an example that will illustrate this. Let's look at this table. Let's say the customers table. We have different columns. Okay, let's say we want to select all the customers where their country is USA. So let's say select all from customers where country is equal to USA. Now, for us to illustrate logical operator, you have to have more than one condition. And we want to, for us to use this where clause with more than one condition, we can use the or and the and. When we use and, it means that the conditions you specified, all of it must be true and must exist before the query part here can run. If you use or, it means if one condition out of the conditions specified is true, one of the two conditions is true, then return the result like that. So we want to use and let's say, for instance, and let's say customer number is greater than 200, so we don't have 103 and 114 number. Let's just use that. And customer number is greater than 200. So one of the real world examples that we use things like this is to say, let's look like you want to get all of the customers. Let's say you want to have something, even YouTube. Let's say, for instance, YouTube, where they have different packages for different countries. Different countries get the requirements for monetization differently based on the country of the owner of the channel. And those kind of things have this kind of logical operator saying that if the country is this and the person has over this particular number of subscribers, and so there are many conditions to be met before the monetization application button can be enabled. So the person is from this country, the person has at least 1,000 subscribers, the person has up to 4,000 watch hours in the last 365 days. So there are three conditions that must be true. So they use and to do that. So these are the code that run behind the hood. And so when you say go, we now have all the country here is USA, and all the customer number here are greater than 200. You won't find anyone less than 200. So these are what we use all those logical operators for. If we say, oh, just when any of the condition is true, we get our result back. Is there any question?
None from me.
Okay. So, but does everybody have an understanding?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're following up.
All right.
Yes,
So remember that
following
if you, yeah, okay, thanks. So remember that if you don't understand, you can book a one-on-one
Good evening,
session.
ma'am.
Good evening. Yeah. Yeah. So if you,
Can you hear me, please?
yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Actually, I'm trying to make more sense for me.
Okay.
My own question is like I missed something because of network.
Okay.
In uploading the data, is it something you upload from? Maybe you have those data as raw data from Excel and not. So I want to know how that is done.
Okay, so these data are sample database that comes for particular database. It comes automatically with your MySQL Workbench installation. I just ran the query of this from a MySQL sample database to just get all of this data. Now, when we get to week 5, we begin to create our own database and create tables and run queries. This first 4 weeks, what we do is to try to use an existing database, and then we'll now look at how to create our own. So if you don't understand how a database works, you'll not be able to create your own effectively. So these data are just like you get a new job. You are not going to start creating database. You already have their customers, so you are going to be working with existing database. So we're starting with learning with an existing database before we go on to creating our own database. Okay? Did that answer your question? Okay, I think our network disconnected. So we'll have the recordings uploaded within 48 hours so that for those who are in and out, you can rewatch, and then you'll be able to make better sense. And then if you still have difficulties, you want to contact any of the admin on the WhatsApp group.
Yes, though network was still disturbing, I didn't get everything.
Okay, so you will get the recording so that you'll be able to rewatch and get all the parts that you missed. And then if you still have problems, try to book a one-on-one session to clarify all of your questions. Okay. So we'll look at the last topic for today, which is joins in MySQL. So the last topic for batch C, and for the older batches, we'll move into Python. So we have something we call join. You see, we have been running queries, and we have customers table, we have payments table. Now, when we come to this payment table, we have the customer number here. But what if we say we want to have our front end, the page, we want to be able to match customer number to the names, and this payments table does not have the name of the customer, and we don't want to look at the payment table and get the customer number and go to the customer table and look for that number and look for what the customer name is. We want to return a table that has the customer number, the customer name, and then the payment information. Then maybe let's say for instance, I don't know if I'm using the best example that will illustrate this. Let's use customers and orders. It will illustrate better. So we have like customer number, customer name, and every information, personal information of the customer in the customers table. And then when we go to the orders table, we have every information about the order, but just told us the customer number that has these orders. But let's say we want to get information from both tables and we want them to display together. We want to get the customer name along with the customer number, along with the order details that customer has ordered. This is where we use join in MySQL. Now in MySQL, a join selects columns from 2 or more tables. And when it selects this column, it selects it based on a common column that we call a predicate. Now, if you look at the orders table, it has a column called customer number. If you come to the customer table, we have the customer number. The tables you are trying to join must have a common column. Both of them have customer number in column. We are going to be joining on this common column that we call a predicate. We have different type of joins. When we use inner join, like this, it selects the records from, so when we're using inner join, there will be a table on the left and there will be a table on the right. Let's just use A and B to illustrate. When we use inner join, it selects records that have matching values in both tables. When we use left join keyword like this, we return all of the records from this table A and any matching record that exists for the table A in table B. So when we say we are selecting based on customer number, that customer number might exist in table A but does not exist in table B. When we use left join, it returns all the records from this left table, which is table A, and the matching records if it finds it from the right table, which is table B. If we use right join, it's going to be the reverse. It will select all of the records from the right table, table B, that have a matching column or matching record in the left table A. And then we have something we call cross join. And when we use cross join, it just returns all the records from both tables, regardless of whether they match or do not match. Just combines all. So let us look at an example of a join. We say we want to get the customer number, the customer name. Let's look at the customer's table again. We want to get the customer number, the customer name, let's say we want the address of the customer. Then we want to also get in the same query, get the order number for that customer. We want to see the status of the order. So 2 tables that we want to get this information from. Let's use a join. So I will say select. There's how we alias or the name of a table and later tell MySQL what that alias means. So I want to represent the customer's table with the letter A. And I want to represent the orders table with the letter B. So I'll say select A dot customer name number. Let's use the number first. I want A dot customer name. I want A dot, it was address line 1. So I'm just saying A means customer's table. I'm using A to make it easy. Instead of typing customers to customer number, customers to customer name, I just use A dot this. And then I'll say B dot order number. So I'm using B to mean the order table. So B dot order number, B dot status, and these are the 2 columns I want from the orders table. Now I'll use the from. So now I'm saying select, and I've listed all the columns I want from the different tables. I'm using A and B to represent the 2 different tables I want the columns from. From, I'll specify the first table, which is A. I'm going to now write the name of the table, which is now customers, and I'll put A. So now it knows that A means customers. So I'll say from customers A. Then what I want to do is to return all the records from the customers table that have a matching record in the orders table. We don't just want to just bring in all the orders or all the no, I think it's right join I will do now, because I want all the records from the orders table where, so left or right, so I'm getting confused now. So okay, I'm using the left join so that I will get all of the matching records from the orders table. So if it doesn't exist in the customer table, we don't need to get it from the orders. If it doesn't exist in the orders, if we want to use right join, we don't need to get it from the customer. So the logic is going to be, you're going to think about the logic to say which table is more important and which table information are you seeking after the most. I need mostly to get the order number and the status, and that means for any orders that have been performed, I want to get the customer number and the customer name. So I'm going to use left join. So in this situation, left or right will actually work. So I'll say select all the columns from customer A. Then now I'm going to say left join. Left join, I'm joining the orders table, and the order is B. So now we are just telling these columns now what A means and what B means. So from customers A, then I use the left join keyword, orders B. What are we joining it on? We say they must have a common column we call the predicates, and we want to say on A.customer number is equal to B.customer number. We are combining these two tables. We are bringing columns from these two tables based on their customer number. So when it goes to the customers table, look at the customer number. Take all of these columns we want from the customer with that number. Then go to the orders table, look at the same number and take the columns we want that has the same customer number. If you don't have a predicate to join them on, then how will you know that you are getting the orders from a particular customer? So that's why there has to be a predicate. If you want to join two tables together, there has to be a common column that they both share, where you use as a reference and say, let's say for instance, in a university setting, you all have matriculation number or student ID. And so when you go to a physics class, it's the student number that you say, let me get the physics grade from this physics class, which will represent a table. And let me go to the chemistry class and get the student grade from that chemistry class. They are using the student ID as a reference. So the student ID is now the common thing that all of those different files have that you use to put their grades together to say all of these grades belong to this student. So we are saying, give me all of the orders that belong to this customer. That is what we are using this predicate to do. So we use the on clause to specify the common column to say where the customer number in the customer table is equal to the customer number in the orders table. And we've done with our join. Join is not difficult, but it's very confusing until you practice it over and over again. You need to give yourself some scenarios and then we return it. Now we can see that we get all the columns from the customer and the orders table that we want, combined in a nice table. And in software development, what we normally do is not to just run this query all the time like that. We actually have something we call views, where we store this query and we never have to run it. All we'll just do is to select all from the view. Okay, but we're going to look at views later on. I'm not going to complicate your life today. So the last thing we're going to look at is to see that we can do this and get record from more than two tables. So joins is not just for two tables. You can do for several, 5, 10, 20, hundreds of tables to run a join. Okay, so let's say that I want to add something from the payments table. Let's look at the payment. I'll copy this because I don't want to rewrite it. So the payments has customer number 2 in common. So yes, we can combine the payments table because it has a customer number column, which is common to it and the orders and the customer table. So what do we want to get from the payments table? Let's say we want to get amounts from the payments table. Okay, so let's get the amount from the payment table. So this is not the best query, but we just want to use it to illustrate that we can get this record from more than 2 tables. So now it will be select A, the customer number, A, the customer name, A dot address line 1, B dot order number, B dot status. Let's use a C now to say what we want from the payment table. So let's say we get C dot amount. From customers A, left join orders B on A dot customer number equal to B dot customer number. Let's left join again, left join, and now we'll say payment C on. Now we'll say B dot customer number, or you can say A dot customer number. Anyone is equal to. It's the C dot customer number that is important. So there's an error here. We have this wriggly line. So left join. So we'll put left and we'll not put the join. So left join payment C on b.customer number equal to c.customer number. So I've just added a third table. When we say go, we have amount now for each of that stuff. Okay, so this is how we write joins. You have to practice it more and more, and this covers week 1 and 2 topics. Anybody with questions before we close for batch C and move into the topics for Python for the other courses that are present? Any question? All right, so for those for batch C of course 2, Web Dev 0224C, you can stay on if you want to learn Python, but you don't start Python until week 8. And for those of you in a different batch, from batch A of Web Dev 0224A, 24B, and for course 3, 24A, you can stay on for Python. Okay, so let's just take a 5 minutes coffee break, and then we will come back and start. All right, so I will pause recording for 5 minutes and then we'll continue. All right, everyone, welcome back. We want to look at functions in a deeper way, so that we can understand the concept of functions. And then if we still have time, we'll look at object-oriented programming, because grading assignment 7 for those of you who submitted. I think for batch A, I realized that there's no depth of understanding from the pre-recorded videos about that. And if we're not able to finish that for today because of time, we'll carry it over to next week and also have a combined class to go into details with all of these topics that are a little challenging. Now, we looked at in the beginning of Python that we can run scripts, like a Python code as a script. And one thing we did not cover is to see how we want the file to run as a script. There is something we always find at the bottom of a lot of Python code that says if we have it like name is equal to main, we want to do something. For now, I'm going to put pass. So whatever we want to do, we want the script to run a function or something, it comes here instead of pass. And we'll write all our code above. And this is always been it. So remember that this is one of the basic things. And the global name, this name is a global, is always set to main by Python when the interpreter runs the code. And so every time you say if name equal to main, it means that you are calling this script, you are running this as a script. So anytime you click run, everything beneath here is going to run. So I'm putting this so you don't get confused, because all the while we just click on our run button there in Visual Studio Code. All right, so our code will come above, and then every time we want to test the code, we'll remove this pass and we're going to test the code there. We have examined functions in their basic forms, and we want to examine function in further and learn how to write these functions in like a production ready way. We have learned that we define function with a def keyword like this. And when we write def, then we specify a name for the function and then followed by parentheses. Let's say we want to greet like this. We put a colon and then what do we want to do? Now, when we use print statements, we always want to just display something on the screen to test that this function is working, to see the results that it will return. But when you are writing your functions for you to use helper functions, you don't use print, you use something we call a return statement that returns a result or an output to the calling program. So when we say it will just return hello and welcome. So this is what it will return. And then when we want to test this, we'll say if name is equal to main, we want to do something. We want to print greet just for us to test this. And when we run, it will print hello and welcome. Okay, so this is how we basically write function. There are two types of arguments when we write functions. When we write a function and the parenthesis has nothing, it doesn't take arguments when we call the function. When we write the function and we define a parameter, it then means that we can supply arguments. And when we supply arguments, we have two types of ways or two types of arguments that we can supply. We have something we have called the positional argument, and then we have something called the keyword argument. Let's say we want to say, given the radius of a circle, we want a function that calculates the area of the circle. So we'll write another function. Let's call this def area circle. And in the parentheses, we specify radius. And then a colon, and we want to return the formula for the area of a circle is pi r squared. So we can say 3.14 times radius raised to the power of 2. This is not a Pythonic way of writing this, but once we illustrate this, and then you'll see how we write this in more Pythonic professional and production way. So we are returning 3.14 times radius raised to the power of 2. And then I'll write print, and we're going to be printing area circle. And let's say we want to get the area of a circle whose radius is 20, like this. And I'll clear here and run, and I get the area 1256.0. Anybody with a calculator can see that this is correct. So when we write the function name and supply an argument there, we are calling the function. What we just did now is called positional argument, but we cannot see this properly because it's just one parameter it takes. So every time we specify it, the system knows that this is the radius. Let's say we are trying to calculate something different. Let's say we want the area of a trapezoid. And if we know how a trapezoid looks, it has two bases, like the top base and the bottom base. And then it has, I think it has the height. So for us to get the area of a trapezoid, we say we are adding the two bases, we divide it by 2 and multiply it by the height. That is the formula. So once we know these formulas, we can easily now use it to create a function. So let's say def area of a trapezoid, like this. And we will now say we want to take 3 parameters, A, B, and let's say the height. Let's say A and B represent the top and the bottom base, and then the height is represented by H. Now, it's going to return 0.5 times A plus B, or it's the same thing as saying A plus B over 2 times the height. Let's just use parentheses so that we know which is calculated first. But so you can see this is the formula. This is what we want it to return. And then here we'll print area trap. And then we'll specify the two bases. Now, because A and B are going to be added, whatever order we specify in, it will work. But let's say we have the A base is 2, the bottom base is 3, and then the height, let's say the height we want is 5. We are using positional argument here because we are specifying the values exactly how it is defined: top base, bottom base, height. we will not have any problem. It is going to print out the correct area of the trapezium. This is called positional argument. In positional arguments, you must specify the arguments in the order in which the parameters are defined. If I decide that I can provide 3 arguments, but I don't care the arrangement of the A and the B and the height, then we'll begin to have problems. Because let's say I put the height first, then I put A here. The answer is not going to be the same, because now I have changed the position. And because it uses positional arguments, my answer becomes wrong. And this brings us to something we call keyword argument. We don't want to have this problem of when we specify them. Sorry, this was supposed to be 5 so that you can see that it's different. We don't want to have this problem of saying when we specify them in different orders, then it begins to have wrong values. We use something we call a keyword argument. How do we write keyword arguments? You put the name of the parameter. Let's say here is h is equal to 5. We specify the name. And then we say here is for b is equal to 3. And here is a is equal to 2. We're going to get back now the correct answer because we have specified them using keyword arguments. So no matter the order, we are assigning the value to what the parameter is. And when we run this, we get the correct answer back. So it does not matter the order when you use keyword arguments. Is that clear? Now, when you begin to write production code, especially for those in course 3, you will have to specify return types. In fact, when you use frameworks like Fast API and the likes, you want to enforce, or maybe they are standard for you to keep. Return types are something you must specify, or the expected return type. And then you begin to get errors when you don't meet those types. We have a module, or before we go to that part, let's see this one that I said was not Pythonic. We have looked at a topic called modules. I don't know if Badbi has read there, but we are combining this class for you to have better and expanded knowledge. Modules in Python, where we say a module is just another Python file that contains functions and methods that you want to use in a different file. We already know about directory structure and so. But we have things we have that we call inbuilt modules that Python comes default with Python. Like we specify the value for pi here, but Python has a math module, which is a Python script that contains different mathematical formulas. And we don't need to care about what the value of it is. We don't need to see what is the value of pi. We don't need to know it. We just need to come here and use the import statement and import the name of the module is called math. So we import math. Now within this math module, we have the pi property or constant or method, whatever it is. And we have imported math. So we'll say math, the name of the module, dot the name of the property that has that value, math.py. So this is the more Pythonic way. We import a module called math that holds this value. So the math module will hold several values. So for those who have done, I think it's in course 3, you've had an assignment like this where you have different formulas and are required to use any of these things that exist in Python inbuilt module for you to use their definitions that they have there. Some of them are called properties, constants, whatever it is called. The idea is that you take the name of the module, dot the name of that property or method or whatever you are calling. I think this is a property that already has a value times the radius raised to the power of 2. So this is the Pythonic way of doing this. Whatever already has a formula in a module, you import that script, you use that formula value. So you don't have to hard code or look for the number of what it is. So now we want to talk about return types. Let me delete this. Let's say I want to still get the area of a circle. So I'll say depth, area, circle. And for this area of the circle, I want to specify the radius. If I want to enforce or give a type hint and say that radius, what is the data type? Is it an int? Is it a float? So it will be expecting to get an int. If you supply an argument that is not an integer, then you begin to get errors. And so let's say we want radius. When you want to specify the type or put the type hint to be able to pass the different specification checks when you are writing production ready code, you use a colon like this and specify the data type. I want this radius to be a float. So I'll say float. Now, when you do that, you have put the data type of that parameter, but you need to put the final return type of the value that it is going to return to the user. When the area of a circle is calculated, sometimes it will return an integer, whole number, sometimes a float. So we're going to use float. Whenever something will return an integer or a float, it's always better to use float. So the final return type we want is float. And so we use this arrow to specify the final return type. We put a colon, and then we'll say what it is that we are returning. So we are going to be returning maths.py times radius square. So this is what we call type hinting. And this is how you are expected to write your production ready code. So for those of you in course 3, I will not want to see your final project naming parameters and writing functions, because all of our projects we want to use functional programming where we want to illustrate all of this properly. And I want to see you using your type hint. And if we set up our CI/CD pipeline, we want it to keep to different specifications that we're going to be looking at in part 3 of course 3 for those there, and for those in course 2, type hint is advanced for you, but you better just start learning things in the best way. So we didn't do type hinting for course 2. We just made it as basic as possible so you don't get lost. But if you can understand and follow, you can just go ahead to use type hinting when you're writing your code. We have looked at this type hint when we have one parameter. What if we have more than one parameter? Let's say we have, area circle is just the radius I'm supposed to put here, which is, let's say, a radius of 20. And so we have that value. So let's say we want to do something like the area of a trapezoid that has more than one parameter, that we need to specify more than one argument. So this is the time where we want to look at how confusing it can get. So we'll say area of a trapezoid like this, and then we need the first base. Let's call that base 1. And base 1, we want to specify the base as let's say an int. And then we use a comma. We have the second base, we call it base 2. You can use A or B or C. So when you are naming things, you are putting variables. You can make it short names like just a single letter, or more descriptive names like this. And let's say base 2 is also an int. And then we have the height. Let's say the height. Let's say the height is a float. So they can all be int, floats. Just put your type in according to the data type you're expecting. We have int and float, so let's say the final return type is going to be a float. And then we're going to be returning base 1 plus base 2 over 2 times height. That's the formula. So instead of doing over 2, we can use 0.5 times base 1 plus base 2 times height. It makes it look more elegant like this. So we've written this using our type hint. We don't need the math here. So whatever you don't need, when we start doing this based on standards, it's going to automatically tell you to remove unused imports. So here we're going to print out area of a trapezoid, and then we want the area of a trapezoid that has, so either you use keyword argument or you just use normal arguments in the order that they are supposed to be specified. So we have 2, we have 3, and we have 5, like that. And so when I do this and I run, all is well, we get our answer. Is there any question?
Sorry, I think I just missed out on the last statement you made.
Okay.
When you are printing the area of the trapezium using the argument type, you said 2, 3, and 5. Why 2, 3, and 5? Sorry, I must have.
Although we're just putting values, it can be any value. So the value of this is just like we're specifying the value of the bases and the height. So maybe if they tell you that the top base of the trapezoid is 7 and the bottom base is 10, and maybe they tell you the height is 17.5.
Okay. Also, all these are hypothetical figures. I thought that they are related to your first line.
Oh no, they're hypothetical figures. As we're testing now, we just use any figure, we get the answer.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So we've seen how to use return types. Now let's look at the next topic we call higher order function. Now a higher order function is a function that contains other function as its parameter, or it returns a function as an output. For example, let's create a function that will add 2 parameters together. And then we will use this in other functions. We'll use it in a function that will take the function as an argument, and in a function that calculates the area of a trapezoid, and another that will take the same function as an argument and calculates the perimeter of a parallelogram, for instance. So we're using these examples for you to get an understanding. The course is not mathematical, but these are the best examples that we can actually use to illustrate these topics. So let's create a higher order function. So we say by definition, it is a function that contains other function as its parameter, or it returns a function as an output. So let's say when we have the area of a trapezoid that we just looked at, the formula is the top base, the bottom, divided by 2 times the height. When we have the perimeter of a parallelogram, we have 2 times side plus base. Let's write the formula here so that we can compare and see why we can do this in higher order function. We have top base, let's say base 1 plus base 2 over 2 times height. And the second formula that we have is 2 times side plus base. So we want to create these 2 functions. We want to have a higher order function. We can see that both of them have something that we're adding in common. When we are writing a function that calculates the area of a trapezoid, we have to add 2 things here. When we're writing a function that calculates the perimeter of a parallelogram, we have to add 2 things here. So how do we create a higher order function? We can first create a function that sums to number. These are hypothetical situations. There are actually functions that sum that already does. We are not reinventing the wheel. We are trying to illustrate this in depth. So def, let's say sum, let's say def sum num, and then we'll say the first number, let's just use num1, or let's use a and b like this, and then we want to return a plus b. So we have a function that adds 2 things. So now we want to pass this function as an argument to the next function. So this is a higher order function. So the area of a trapezoid now is going to have a function that we'll just represent by func, and is going to have c, because what we have as the formula for the area of a trapezoid is the top base plus bottom base divided by 2 times height. We want to represent the height by c like this. And what do we want to return? We want to return the function now that we have, which is going to be this sum num that will add a plus b. So we'll say func. We're dividing the result of that function, because that function is going to return the sum of a and b, divided by 2 times c. So now we have used this in a higher order function way, where we, instead of writing this formula that we had before, we specify 3 parameters, we get the 2 bases and divide it by 2 times the height, and we get 3 parameters and supply 3 arguments. We are now having a function that calculates the sum, and then we are passing that function as an argument to this area of the trapezoid function that we're calculating. And so we pass in the function, we pass in the height. The result of that function is what we are dividing by 2 based on the formula. When you add 2 things, you divide by 2, and you multiply it by this other parameter here, which is the height times c. You return that. We can create another function, the perimeter of a parallelogram, that said is 2 times side plus base. Side plus base is what we're adding. So when we say def peri, let's say para, this is only going to take a function, has its parameter, and we are going to be returning 2 times the function. So this is just all about the concept of higher order function. And so here we can come here to say we want to print let's do 2 print statements, and let's print 2 things. So the first thing we're printing here is, I'm going to use the format string, and I'm going to say the area of a trapezoid is, then I'm going to put the sum num. So before I do this print, let me just call it in a way that you understand. Now, when I'm calling this function, I am saying, I'll do it here, sum num. I'm calling the first function sum num, and I'm going to pass what I am going to be adding together here, which is the 2 bases, let's say 2 and 3, right? And then I am going to pass the third argument. So I'm going to be calling the area of a trapezoid, and then in the parentheses of the area of a trapezoid, I want to supply the function. The function that I have there is sum num, which takes 2 parameters, and then the height. So I remove the print statement so that I can be clearer. We are calling the area of it. We are now calling the function area trapezoid. The first parameter is a function which is expecting a function, and the function we are calling is this as the first parameter. So we are calling the function sum num, and we are supplying the argument, the 2 things we're adding, which is the 2 bases. And then the second parameter we are specifying is the height. So it's a comma separated list, and the second argument is the height. Okay, so we use a print statement to see the value that it prints to the screen. And so we have the same value as when we just wrote the function without using higher order function. And if we want to do the one for the parallelogram, we have said we can just print it. So we'll first say, let's say we'll call it para, and it only wants to take a function as its argument. So we just do sum num, and we specify the 2 side and the base. Let's say it's just 2 and 3, and let's print this. So let's say print, so put it in the print statement so we can get the value. So when you use a return statement, it returns to a calling program at the back end in the software development. But when we are testing, we need to print that so we can see the value. And so when I run, we have the value of both of them printed. 12.5, 10 for them. Any question? So higher order function is very powerful, and we need to understand the concepts so that we can use it to look at the concepts of nested functions and other things that we're going to see later. But I'm using this to illustrate, to tell you that when we use higher order function, it just takes a function. So these are higher order functions because it uses a function as its parameter. So you take a function as its argument. When you do technical interviews for jobs, you are going to meet a lot of these kind of questions, and you want to write elegant code. You want to see how Pythonic your code will be. Okay. Anybody with question? Okay, so in the absence of question, we'll move to the next topic, which is looking at args and keyword args. Args written args like this, and then we have keyword args written keyword args like this. You'll see this a lot, especially when we are doing object-oriented programming. When you're building your software at the back end, we'll see a lot of args, keyword args. These are just conventional names. You can give them any name you want, but you know what is arg and keyword arg. So these are two special symbols that are used to pass arguments in Python. They both use a wildcard and its asterisk sign. This is the character we use preceding the parameter name. So if we want to use the name args, we'll use one asterisk sign before the args that got no space. And what this means is that it is a non-keyword. The arg like this is a non-keyword that we use when we don't know in advance the number of arguments that the user will pass. And so when you are building your back end and you need to retrieve data from the database, let's say you have a sign up front end page, it's on the internet, people sign up. You can't know in advance who has signed up, who has not signed up, what is in the database. You just know maybe on your own admin page, you just want to see all the names of the people that have signed up. How do you pass the arguments if you want to get something about a specific group of people or about a population when you don't even know that population in advance? So to make it dynamic, we use this wildcard character, the asterisk, and then args. You don't know in advance the number of arguments that the user will pass when the function is called. Then we use keyword arguments. We double asterisk like this, keyword args. It can be any name. Once it's double asterisk, we'll know it's for keyword arg. Once it's one asterisk, we'll know it's for arg. And this is a keyword argument that we use when we do not know how many keyword arguments the user will pass when a function is called. Let's illustrate this in a function so that it will make sense. So if we want to create a function that takes two parameters, one of the parameters will be maybe the fixed last name, and the other will be a list of all the members of the family, something like that. Let's just do something to illustrate. So we want to create a function with the first parameter to hold the family name. So let's say we are creating this function now. We don't know in advance when you say, oh, the head of the houses should come and register all their family members. Family A will have 10, 20 family members. Family B might have 50 or so. We don't know in advance how many members of family people will have, and we don't want to restrict their number and say there's only 5 family members you can enter. So we use this wildcard that we don't know in advance how many arguments. So they want to list all of their family members. We don't know how many of them will come in. Let's create a function we call def. Let's call it as family. We'll call this function name family. And we have the first parameter. Let's call the first parameter arg1. You can call it any name you want. And then we specify the return type. We'll say we want it to be string, that the expected data type is string. And then let's say we have a second argument. This second argument is going to be a list. We don't know the number of items in this list, so we use that asterisk sign. So instead of putting arg1, let's just make it something that we understand better. We'll say last name, and we want this to be the string. And then we have the arguments that we do not know in advance how many the user will supply. So the parameter will have an asterisk sign, and let's say the names of the family members. So the last name will be the same, but now the names now is what we do not know. So let's say this name will be a list, and the items within the list will all be, let's say, strings, for instance. So put a list of string like this. The expected return type that we want, let's say we want the return type of, let's just say string. We're just going to change it to be string. I'll delete this automatically written one. So we'll say we expect it to be string that will return. And so for us to make it string, we just want to write a statement and say the family members of, we'll plug in the last name, are, we plug in the list here that is written. Let's just do something like that and see whether that works. So we just bring out the list. So it will be like a string. So let's say return, and then we want to say F, the family name is last name, and the members are, we can now say we want to join all of the names as the members like this. Or we can just specify the family name is last name and the members are named. So we get it as a list coming out like that. Let's try this one. If it doesn't work, we will edit it to just specify the names parameter. So now if we call the family now, so we want to print family. The first family we are calling, we specify the last name first, and then we have 4 members, John, Jane, Jack, Jill. Second family we are printing, the last name is Jones. Jones family has Jim, Jill, and Jenny, 3 members. The third family, the Brown family, has Bob, Bill, Ben, and Bella as the members of the family. And the last family, let's say White, let's say has just 1 member called Wendy. So we're printing them differently. So now you see that everybody can use this dynamically and provide endless number of arguments. So that's why I say if you don't know the number of arguments the user will specify in advance, you use this wildcard character asterisk in front of the name of the parameter. And so the user now can specify endless number of arguments as you want. So let's print this and see. So we now have the family name is Smith and the members are John, Jane, Jack, Jill. The family name is Jones and the members are Jim, Jill, Jenny. And you see how we have used this statement to have a function that will get all of the names that a user enters. And in the real world scenario, we are not going to be hard coding this. It might be something we are passing a variable that's stored information collected from a database, and it will just tell us all of the values that are in that list that we have. So assuming the expected return type is a list here, then our return statement is going to contain list that will be displayed. But because we say string, we just make sure that we wrote this to be a string just to avoid complexity. So take note of your return types, your final return types when you specify them. For those in course 3, it is expected that all your functions, your assignments, your project have your return types. For the return type hinting must be present for all of your parameters, your variables, and everything that you have there, that return types can be specified. Anybody with question? So we can achieve something. We can try to use keyword arguments. We said that we use double asterisk when we don't know in advance the number of keyword arguments that anybody is, like the user is going to specify. So let's look at this. Let's say let me just write something else. I'll just do something simple. Def, let's say family. And here we're going to say, we'll put double asterisk and we'll put fam. Now, we are going to have keyword arguments and we don't know in advance. We want to just get we want to print out the names that are going to be entered there, and we're going to be supplying keyword arguments. We don't even know the names of this keyword argument. Let's say we just want to return let's return a string. So here you can still specify your return types. Let's make this easy. So we want to return the family, and we'll put last name consists of first names. So now we are returning the last name and the first name keyword argument that we want to return back. So if, for instance, I'm returning this family last name, this is not the best example, but let's just use this as an example so that we can see, just illustrate how we use this, and then in our software development project we can have better real-world example that will make sense. So let's say we are printing last name is equal to Simpson, first names, we'll list it there. Last name is equal to this, first names that. This return type does not even help us to illustrate when we don't know in advance the keyword argument. Let's not use this example. It's not the best. It's not going to illustrate the purpose of this. So I'm just going to delete this. Let's see what we are going to return. Let's say we want to return all of the, for key value in farm.items. Let's see if this actually works. And then we'll say print. And I'll say family. Father John, mother Mary, son Jimmy, daughter Sue. And I'll print again another one. And let's print without having all of different, we'll have different keyword arguments. And I'm calling the family function, and I will say family, I will say last name equal to Smith. Father's name is John, mother's name Mary, daughter Sue, and then we have this like this. So you see what's going on here. We said we use this double asterisk and keyword arguments like this if we don't know in advance the keyword arguments that the user is going to supply. We are printing family and we're supplying several keyword arguments: father, mother, son, daughter. The second one is last name, father, mother, son, daughter. So we can have, we don't know in advance, on the fly they can just have keyword arguments for anything. And so when I clear this and I run, we now have we are printing, we want to just print father John, mother Mary, son Jimmy, daughter Sue, and then this one has none. The last name, none for this one. Then we have last name Smith, father John, mother Mary, son Jimmy, and daughter Sue. The next one, we still have none printed. So let's say, instead of this, let's say return. Let's do this like this. So you can do several things with this. It's a very powerful stuff. So what you return depends on what you want to return based on your software specification or what you are designing. But we're just trying to illustrate that you can have keywords in one first print statement that does not exist in the second and the third. So users, you don't know in advance what keyword arguments they will use, and they can put endless number of keyword arguments and they make up the names on the fly as they use it. So we now return based on whatever we want our return value to be. I'm just using a condition here to say if the keyword argument contains last name, it should print insert the last name family is, and we use this format to insert last name. And if not, you should just return the names that are present, the Smith family, and then Smith, you should use the first one to put just list everybody there. Okay, so these are the args and keyword args, and these are what they are used for. Anybody has question?
Okay. Please. I'm understanding that with the keyword arguments, is it that when you're dealing with dictionary type of like data type of Python data type, dictionary type, if you're dealing with that, that's when you use the keyword arguments, right?
Oh no. You use keyword arguments when you do not want to have wrong values in the events that you know. So we looked at, first of all, we looked at that we have two types of arguments when we are supplying arguments: positional and keyword. When you use positional arguments, you must specify the values that you're supplying. So let's say you are getting something that takes, you define a function that has 3 parameters. When you are specifying the argument, you must specify the arguments in the order that you define the parameters. If you specify length, breadth, and height, you have to specify the arguments, the value of length, breadth, and height. That's positional. Keyword is now when you say, I'm not going to specify it in any order, but I want to name the arguments as I do it. So you now say length is equal to the value, comma, breadth is equal to the value, height is equal to value. So you can put them in any order, and the interpreter knows that, okay, this is the value for length, height, and breadth. I don't need to put them in any order particularly, since we know that this is the value. The keyword now is you specifying the parameter name is equal to the value when you supply the argument. I don't know if it makes sense.
Okay, it does make sense. Like because I asked that question because of the examples you gave. See dictionary data types. So I was thinking probably when you're involving the dictionary data types, you are used to keyword arguments.
Oh no! It's not that. That's not the meaning for keyword argument. Keyword argument just means that you are naming the values. It's like name value. You're naming the values you are specifying. Yeah, it still relates to dictionary. Like in dictionary has name value pairs. So the same thing. Your argument is like name value pair. Your arguments are now named. That is what is called keyword argument.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
So if I may ask, please, in the production environment, which of these methods normally do developers use? I don't know if my question makes sense. I don't know.
Yes, it makes sense.
I'm just curious about
which
that.
is more Pythonic when you do production. So it depends. Most of the time, actually, people mostly use keywords more than they use a positional, because positional can create errors when users supply arguments in any order. So when it's keyword, you know that you are putting the keyword of name is equal to this, first name or last name is equal to that. So it still depends on the scenario. And when you are developing your software, there is no one that is better than the other in production environments. But majority of the time, when you create functions that you are going to be using as helper function, you are going to be using keyword arguments, especially when the parameters are a lot, so that you don't specify the values in a positional way. And when that position is violated, then the answers become wrong.
Hello, ma.
Yeah.
Hello, ma.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I want to ask, which one is the best practices, the one that one should use in production coding between the key and the positioner?
There is no best
argument.
But there's no best, but if you have the opportunity to use keyword, just use keyword. But there is no best. It depends on the scenario. Okay. There is no best way. So this is where your developer instinct comes. You use what is most elegant in your situation, and what is most what do you call it? What is most what is more optimized, especially when it comes to time and the rest. But I would say use keyword argument for.
It's okay. Thank you.
For as much as you can. Yeah. So we have something we call default function parameter, and functions can have default parameters value, so that when no value is passed as an argument, it now uses this default parameter values. Now, how do we write this one? Let me delete all of this so that we can see. I'll use pass there, and let's define a function. Let's say, for instance, I have a function. Let me say def names. That's the function. And then I'll just have last name is equal to, and I'll put the last name here to be do. So if somebody specifies a name, this is not the best example. Let's use an example that can actually go in real world. Let's say def person, and the person has a name parameter and a country parameter. Now, let's say this is something that exists only in, let's say for example, in Kenya. So we know that majority of the time the person is from Kenya. This resides in Kenya, right? So we put a default parameter value equal to Kenya, so that they don't need to specify a value of country when they are putting the arguments. If they don't specify a value of country, it defaults to Kenya. If they want a new value, then if they want it's not Kenya, then they can specify the value. So we'll say the person, the name, and the country. For the country, we specify a default value. So in the event the person does not specify their country, it defaults to Kenya. like that. And then I'll say, let's print this. So we are printing, let's say person, and this person is, let's say, the name of the person is, let's say, Jane Doe. And Jane Doe is, we specify the country, Uganda. And let's print a second one. And let's say print person, John Doe, and we don't specify a country. So when we don't specify a country, we have default value, it defaults to Kenya. And when we specify a country, it prints the country we specify there. So we're going to run this, and it prints Jane Doe is from Uganda, and John Doe, we didn't put a country for John Doe, but it just says directly it's from Kenya. Since we didn't put a country, it just defaults to Kenya. So default function parameter are those ones that have a value, so that you don't need to specify it if the value doesn't change. And you see this in applications that you build. I was once building a network application to be able to look at SSL certificates and analyze SSL certificates of all the devices on the internet. And we always have the default port number for HTTPS to be 443. And so we just specify that default to 443. In rare cases, people change their port numbers. And so in the event that we want to scan a different port, then we now need to supply the argument of a new port number. But because majority of the time we don't need to, we just put that as a default parameter value. Okay, so those are the real world applications. You are going to meet this when you are developing your application. Anybody with question? So we have something we call okay, we know that because when we define functions, right, the function definitions cannot be empty. That's why we always use pass. We know the meaning of pass because we don't want to error out why we put placeholders. So I don't think I mentioned it before why I use pass there before. If you want a function to use positional only arguments and you don't want that function to allow keyword arguments, you put a / after the parameters. For instance, I have, let me delete this. Let's say I have def, let's say def person, let's just use person. And we want it not to allow you, like now in production. So this is where your question, when you say which is the best to use in production, is you can actually specify how you want people to supply their argument in production. You want that when that function is called, you don't want them to be able to use positional arguments. There is something you can do during the function definition that people are not allowed to use positional arguments. And there's something you should do again if you want to say you don't want anybody to use keyword arguments. If you do not want a function, if you want a function to use positional arguments only, which means that when the user supplies the argument, it must be in the order in which the parameters are defined during the definition of the function. And so if you want that to happen, we are going to say, let's say the person, we have first name, last name, and then for the last parameter, we put a /. This way, you are saying that you want the person to use positional only argument. And let's say we want to return F, let's do like this, first name, last name. Let's just make it simple. And then here when we run this function, we want to say print person Jane Doe. So let's test this. If we come here and say print first name is equal to Jane, and we print last name is equal to Doe, we're going to have an error with this one that uses keyword arguments, because we have said by specifying the /, we are saying that this function should use positional only arguments. We don't want keyword when it is called. So in production, you are going to be telling your system that when a particular function is used or is called by the user, when they are supplying the arguments, You don't want them to use keyword arguments. You want them to use positional. So these are the controls that you can put. You put a / when you want to have positional only arguments. So when we run, we'll get an error with the one that uses keyword because the / indicates to not use keyword. So you see, person got some positional only argument passed as keyword argument, first name and last name here. So you see that error that we got there. And the first one printed John Doe because we want it positional only, no keyword allowed. Okay? So if you want it the other way, you want that particular one to be able to use keyword arguments only. You don't want them to use positional arguments. You now have to use I think it's an asterisk. Let's see. Let's put an asterisk and see which one gives us an error. No, it's not an asterisk there. We can do it so that we want it to have both positional and keyword arguments. You want to allow only keyword. Let's see how we can allow only keyword. When you want to allow only keyword arguments, I think the asterisk comes first, not at the end. So I just remembered now. So you put asterisk and then you do like this. I think that's the error. So when you want to allow positional only, you put the / at the end, right? When you want to allow keyword only, you put a asterisk before you start the parameter names like this. And so now we're going to have the error in reverse, where this first one will error out and the second one is going to print. Let's put it in a different order so that the error does not halt the execution like this. So we'll clear and then we'll run. So we're going to have an error here because we want to allow only keyword, and this is going to error out. And so when we run this, we have type error, person takes 0 positional arguments, but 2 were given because it does not allow positional arguments. Okay, so if you want to say allow, you want to combine the two types to say you want any argument that you have before the / should be positional arguments, and any arguments you have after the asterisk are keyword only. So let's say let's create another type. Let's say def, and we have def allow. Let's say allow all as that, and we want to have the first name, we have the last name, we want to say everything before the /. We want to put a / here to say that we want this to be specified as positional only, and then we want to have asterisk to say everything that comes after this now should allow only keyword, age, and let's say gender, right? And then we want to return first name, last name, age. Let's just return first name and last name. I'll return age. Let's say this person is 8 years old. So let's say we're returning this. And is a gender. Okay. So what we've done here is to say we want to allow both positional and keyword arguments. We want to say anytime you have a / is everything that is before here are positional only, and everything that is after the asterisk is keyword only. Remember that we just looked at how to have keyword only and how to have positional only. The asterisk comes at the beginning before the parameter names for those that are keyword only, and those that are positional only, the / comes after the parameter name. So we're combining both now like this. And so if I now say print, let's generate an error. So print, and the allow all is the name, and then now we want to say these ones are supposed to be positional only, first name and last name, but I want to make it have an error. I'm going to use keyword now. First name is equal to John, last name is equal to Doe, and and this one are supposed to be keyword only. I'm going to use position for it, and gender I'm going to use female. So now we are actually with this Visual Studio Code, we're even getting this wriggly line there for us. So let's say let's use this age is equal to, and let's use gender. So we're still going to generate an error because we want it to allow these ones to be positional only, which means that it's not supposed to have a keyword here, and these ones to be keyword only, which means it is correct here, but we already have an error with how we specify the first one. And let's make the second one correct. Print allow all. We have the name, first name is John, last name is Doe, because these are supposed to be positional only. Now the keyword only is age, so we'll say age is equal to 30, and then we'll say gender is equal to male. So this one is going to be correct because we kept the rules saying that allow only positional for these first two, indicated by / after them, and allow only keyword for these last two, indicated by an asterisk before it. So the first one should give us an error, and the second one should not. Let's reverse the order so that we can see it printed out. So let's say the first one should not give us an error, but the second one should give us an error. So let's see if this all is well. We clear, we run, and then we have the first one printed. John Doe is a 30-year-old and is a male, because this is what keeps to the rule. The second one has a type error because it got positional only arguments passed as keyword argument. First name and last name is supposed to be positional only, but we pass them as keyword. Does everybody understand?
Yes, please.
Okay. So let's just look at one last topic on functions, which is nested function, before we close for the day, because I'm saying that this lesson I've gone for too long, so we don't start losing understanding because of the duration of the lesson. Okay, and then next week Friday we can also have a combined class and go in detail again about all of these topics that we need to understand in greater details. So nested functions is just a function that is defined inside another function. And one of the use cases of nested function is to provide encapsulation and hide function from external access. So the function that is hidden from the global scope is the nested function. So using the nested function is what we will use to now understand the concept of closures that we are going to look at next week. So in nested function, we want to create a function that adds two numbers. This will not make sense because we're just creating unnecessary complexity, but in real-world examples, we'll begin to have this make sense. So let's say we have a function called addNum, and this addNum function takes a parameter, let's say x, and then we want to have an inner function. So the inner function is a nested function, and we'll define another function here, def, and let's call this inner input. And this function will take a parameter or an argument, and we'll say the parameter is y, and then we want to return x plus y here, and then from the outer function we want to return inner input. So what we are doing now is that we are returning this inner input returns x plus y, and this addNum returns this function. Okay, so we can call the outer function and provide an argument, and then this will now return the inner function, and then the return inner function will take an argument and add the argument to the argument of the outer function. Okay, so let's look at this, and for us to illustrate this, let's just do the concept of closure, because we can't illustrate this without talking about closure. A closure is a function that retains access to variables from the outer scope. So this inner scope now it has access to the variable x, the definition of it. And when you look at scope, we say that a scope is when we define a variable within a function the variable is known within that function, and outside of the function, once the call of that function ends, the system does not know what that value is outside of the function, or what that variable is outside of the function. But when we have a closure retains access to variables from the outer scope, even after the function has finished execution. Now, closures will have full access to variables and names defined in a local namespace. So for closures, now we need this outer function, which is the enclosing function, and then we need the inner function, which we call the nested function. Then we need a variable capture. Let's say the variable is x. Okay? So for us to now define a closure here, we are returning the inner input. So let's say we get a first closure, we call it closure 1. And closure 1 is going to be equal to, we call the outer function addNum 10. Now, we have the value of closure 1, which is return, and the return value of closure 1 is a function. The function it returns is now going to take another parameter x. So now what we did with closure 1 is we called addNum, and we supply an argument called 10. Now we have supplied this parameter 10. What we want to make it do is to add this, whatever we get here, plus the new argument we are going to supply for the inner function. Now we want to have final closure. Let's say, for instance, I'm just giving random names. Will now be closure 1, 5. Closure 1 is going to be a function. If you look at this nested function that we created, when the inner function executes, it returns x plus y. The value of x is the parameter of the outer function. The inner function takes an argument called y, and it adds this to the argument of the outer function, and then it returns the inner function. Now, so you have to create a variable and call the outer function and supply the value for x. Closure 1 variable now is a function, and so you have to call that function and supply the variable y. So whatever is stored in closure 1 is going to be added to this. And so let's print final closure. You need to go over the video again to understand this concept, and it's 15, 10 plus 5. So that's why I said, you see how we are just making this complex, why we can just say create a function that takes two parameters and add them together. But we are looking at this function of nested functions for something greater data for us to be able to understand this. Okay? So we just talked about scope, and we say that when we create a variable outside of a function, it belongs to the global scope, and we can access it from anywhere. But when we create a variable inside of a function, it is local to the function, and we cannot access it outside the function. But when we have an inner function, then we can access that variable within the inner function, because the enclosing function owns the inner function. Okay? So anybody with question? So if there's no question, this class has gone for almost 3 hours, and so I think we should end the class so that we don't lose knowledge if it's too long. And next week we're going to continue by looking deeper at the topics that we have discussed. Okay, the recording will be available within 48 hours hopefully, and I will send it in the group chat for all the classes present once it is available.
Mr. Koya, there's a question regarding collection type. Will that be discussed in the next live session?
What's that?
The collection, will that be discussed in the next live session?
Yes, we are going to discuss collection types and object-oriented programming. So I'm trying as much as possible to discuss all the topics that we have in details. We'll see if we want to have a class. Anybody with any issues, you can actually request a one-on-one for a topic. If we are not going to cover the topic before, you need to know it. But we'll try to have a combined class next Friday, since most of these topics are overlapping within the different classes. So we can all have extended time for classes and learn this topic in greater detail. So those in course 2 are benefiting now because they are learning details of course 3. And course 3 is benefiting because you are going backwards at the beginning to look at the basics again before you go forward. So yeah, next week we're going to try as much as possible that during all our live classes, we touch on all the topics that we have discussed in the different classes and pre-recorded videos, but in greater details.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you, everyone, and I wish you a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. Yeah.